Hi, and welcome to Complete and Cast, the official podcast for Complete and Box video games. I'm your host, Spencer, and today for episode 29, we're going to do something a little bit different. Yes, it's a podcast for video games, but if I want to talk about football, NFL football, with no video games involved, I think I will. With us today, we have Brian Beversluis, and I pronounced that right?
You did pronounce that right, yes.
Oh, baby! Who not only lives around the area and is a good friend, he is a writer for Cat Scratch Reader, which is the SB Nation website for the Carolina Panthers. So he's a big Panthers fan. We're all sorry. We have to get it out of the way right away.
Yeah,
my last friend I had on, when we talked about Madden, it was a Bengals fan. So the first thing I do is, I'm sorry, kind of thing. Of course, every Pats fan in the world is gracious and wonderful and a delight to be around. So
totally,
we got that going on. So listen, today we're just talking football. Where we're sitting right now, we're about a month and a half-ish away from the draft. We have NFL free agency going on, and we like us some football. So Brian, let's start with the end of the 2016 season. What happened to your Panthers in 2016?
Well, the best way I can summarize it is simple. A lot of shit hit the fan in that season. I don't know if this is if I can curse on this podcast or not, but that's the way I'm going to.
I prefer not to, but we'll go with it. Maybe no more.
Okay, fair enough. So you look at the 2015 Panthers, who made the Super Bowl, went 15-1, dominated the NFC, and a lot of things just went right for that team. They had so many guys who didn't get hurt. They had so many players playing out of their minds. Cam Newton was protected. And then you look at the 2016 season, and it's basically the inverse of that. As soon as their left tackle, Michael Oher, went down, they had to move their right tackle, who wasn't particularly good at that, over to left tackle. So then they had a backup left tackle who really didn't belong there anyway, and a backup right tackle who wasn't all that great either. And that just made it real bad for the Panthers because they are a long passing team. They throw the ball deep down the field.
I mean, when you have Kelvin Benjamin, that's what you ought to do.
Yeah, you had Kelvin Benjamin, you had Ted Ginn. And it's funny, when you bring up Kelvin Benjamin, he wasn't there for the 2015 season. So a lot of people looked at that and said the offense has got to be better just by default. But when the injury bug bites you, sometimes there's just no way around it. So Cam was getting beat up every game. He couldn't throw the ball downfield. Their rushing attack didn't work. So even though their defense did play admirably, especially towards the end of the year, it just didn't matter. Without having Josh Norman there, the secondary needed to change a little bit, and the offense just couldn't overcome that. So
isn't that amazing how just a couple things for an NFL team can really change a team? What was the record that they ended up with this year?
They ended up with 6-10.
Okay, so 15-1 to 6-10 is more than average, but you can easily have an 11-5 team that becomes a 7-9 team, and you look at the team and you go, oh, they're really similar. That happens seemingly in the NFC South so often. I mean, for the longest time, it was like every team would win the division and then be last.
Yep.
And then win the division and be last, and it's like, that just goes to show you, for the most part, the great parity of football, because it's, I remember going in, thinking hey, dude, it could be Pats Panthers in the Super Bowl kind of thing, and again, it shows you how small everything is. The Pats O-line was terrible at the end of 2015 because of injuries like the Panthers in 2016, and we all saw that AFC Championship game where Brady was hit 20-something times. I mean, some record for him out of all the games he's played. So, speaking of the Patriots, some good things happened at the end of 2016. Now, I know obviously you don't really, the general sentiment, unless you're a Pats fan, is these guys again, and it's understandable. I get it. It's when the Yankees were winning a lot, it's these guys again. But the Falcons are in the NFC South. How did, the way that Super Bowl rolled out with the huge lead and then losing the lead, how did you guys view it as Panthers fans?
Well, I don't speak for myself in this situation because I'm a little bit unique in the way I looked at that, but most Panthers fans were just super happy to see the Falcons fail so horribly in the Super Bowl when they had it right there. And a lot of them felt that it was actually better that the Panthers basically had no chance at winning the Super Bowl at any point against Denver when Atlanta. You could go in. There was actually a Panthers fan who went onto their SB Nation site, which is called the Falcoholic, and chronicled the comments during the open thread of the Super Bowl, where they went from, we're winning, oh my God, we're going to win the Super Bowl, to, okay, this is not so good, to, okay, wait a minute, Tom Brady might bring this back, to, oh my God, we're screwed. And It is pretty freaking funny, I must say.
So, I mean, as an AFC East fan, I would rather have pretty much any team except for maybe the Eagles because it's funny win the Super Bowl over the Bills, Jets, or the Dolphins. Like, especially the Jets. Like, I just don't want to see them. Now, would the Falcons be considered one of the Panthers' biggest rivals because they're in division?
It seems like in the NFC South, the fan base is all together, at least from what I've interacted with on my SB Nation site. I mean, every fan base has its terrible, terrible Facebook fans that you're going to run into.
Yes.
But from the most of my interaction with Bucks fans, Falcons fans, like I actually interact with a lot of their writers on Facebook and Twitter, and for the most part, it just seems like they all really hate the Saints of all teams.
Huh.
Yeah.
And is there a particular reason?
I think it was just the whole who dat, we're better than you obnoxiousness of most of their fan base, and the Bounty Gate thing, because they're trying to blatantly hurt your players. So I think that had a lot to do with it. The Falcons and Panthers have generally had a pretty good rivalry. I know that a lot of Panthers fans will hate Matt Ryan forever for telling the Panthers to get the F off his field after they beat him, and then the Panthers won the next game, and then the Panthers guys basically said the same thing. So, it's division football. Like, there's going to be rivalries. But that said, I personally don't really have a huge problem with the Falcons or the Bucks, just
kind of the Saints because of
Just
that
of the
few
Saints,
year
yeah.
period where they were very good
Yeah.
and all that. Well, that's interesting because it doesn't necessarily have to be a good team that's hated. I mean, like, everyone hates the Jets, and what have they done in 30 years?
Yep.
I mean, and for the Pats, it's interesting. I would say if you talk to most Pats fans, and I'm talking real actual Pats fans, not like just someone who, Tom Brady, let's go, they would say Broncos. The Broncos are like, if we're Goku, or maybe we'd be Vegeta, they're the Goku, they're just like, they're always built to, even on their off year. I mean, they had an off year last year, and that game, the Pats and Broncos in Denver was like pure smash mouth football. It was like 16-3 the Pats won, and it was just one of those games where at any point you're like, they're going to lose this. They're going to lose this. They're going to lose this kind of thing. So I would say number one would be Broncos. And then number two, you got to go with John Harbaugh's Ravens. Just everything to hate about the Ravens. It's just so, I mean, Ray Lewis wearing a fedora on ESPN doesn't save him. Like, you just got to hate him. I don't know. There's something about that. So the Patriots beat the Falcons in the Super Bowl, and it was pretty cool in my opinion.
A lot of memes.
I've never seen, like, personally, like, legitimately, you can ask anyone who was over here. I gave up. I mean, who wouldn't? It was 28-3 with a little bit left to go in the fourth quarter, and at that point, I was just saying, please let it make it close, so at least people won't be like, Brady's the worst, blah, 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 4-3 in the Super Bowl. At least be like, he made a comeback, The Falcons team was just really good. I've never seen a game like that, where it was just such a mixture of them, of the Falcons just making mistakes and the Pats making every huge play possible. I mean, after Julio had that grab on the sideline, that was like, it was the helmet catch of, skill, of pure skill. I was like, it's over at this point. Absolutely nuts. Now, that was my favorite Super Bowl of all time. I know there's recency bias and all that, but it was just phenomenal. If you were to give your top 3 Super Bowls, or even just top 1, what are we looking at?
You're gonna hate this, but the one where the Patriots blew their perfect season was pretty good in my opinion, just from an entertainment standpoint.
From an entertainment standpoint, I can totally agree with you. It's also a game I refuse to watch. Like a Falcons fan would never watch 51 again. I have never watched 42 again. But, like, in terms of an actual game, I'm not going to say it was boring because it was very interesting, but, like, I don't think it was as good as, like, 38 between the Panthers and the Pats.
I was going to bring that up as my next one. That game was very good.
What a great game. 0-0 with 2 minutes left in the half, and then it ended up being 14-14. I mean, that's crazy.
Yep.
Steve Smith. I don't think Jacob Delhomme, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think he was okay, but he wasn't, like, pulling the team on my back kind of thing. But Steve Smith in that game was just everything.
Jake Delhomme made the throws when he absolutely needed to in that game. I will give him that. He made great throws to Musa Muhammad and Steve Smith, and and those two receivers definitely carried Jake Delhomme throughout his career for sure. But yeah, it was a phenomenal game, and you got pretty much a good bit of everything. Good defensive football, high-flying offense, a running game, hard hits, it's just...
So many big plays. Every time the Panthers scored, it was on like a 70, 50, 60, 70-yard play. What people will always forget, haters always try to discount Brady no matter what he does. So the early Super Bowls, it was always, Vinatieri. And no one's going to disagree that in the first Super Bowl with the Rams that he wasn't a game manager, because he was. He just was, just don't lose the game. But by the time Super Bowl 38 rolled around, he was coming into his own, or he came into his own. And Vinatieri missed 2 short field goals that game. The one was like a 33-yarder. It was like an extra point, and he missed it. And we could go on and on about that game. It's a fantastic game, but I absolutely agree. Do you have any more to add, or are those the top 2 for you?
It's tough because the only other Super Bowl the Panthers really played in...
It was terrible. 50?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Even if the Panthers would have won in the opposite way, it was a terrible game.
No, it was just an all-around bad game. Bad play calling, bad officiating...
Bad field,
yeah. Like
Santa
Michael
Clara.
Oher is literally on skates at one point blocking Von Miller. You see him standing upright, not going backward, but he's sliding backwards because the field was just so bad.
I can't believe they didn't just uproot that entire field and just whatever, because you heard about it all year. That was a big thing. You guys probably talked about that on Cat Scratch Reader, like, the field is terrible.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, they had time. The 49ers were not in the playoffs. They had like a month and a half to be like, all right, let's resod everything, whatever. And they didn't.
Yep.
And I'll just never understand that.
Laughable.
I like the idea of outside football for the Super Bowl. When they play it at the Meadowlands, where the Seahawks won, that's cool, but they have a good field. It's not laughable. So
yeah.
I absolutely agree. The one more that I got to throw on clearly is Super Bowl 49 with the Seahawks and Pats. I think that overall it was a better game than 51. And it had that one play at the very end, but for some reason 51 will always stay with you had no idea that was coming.
Yep.
So we are getting into the big part. Football is year-round nowadays, and how great is that?
Oh, it's great. I always have something to talk about, always have something to write about, whether it's purely speculative or news or just looking at the rosters they have. No, everybody loves a little rosterbation every now and again, and it always makes for a great article.
And I think that the only time during the year where it really kind of gets, whatever, is before training camp in May and June. After the draft, you're like, okay, we got a month and a half of them being like, where's our players going to go on vacation? Who's working out with Tom Brady? And it's like,
yep.
Okay. But then after that, once training camp goes, it's done. There's literally only a month and a half where you're like, there's really not much to say. So free agency has been going on for about a week now, maybe a week and a half. And it's been really big for certain positions like wide receiver. We're seeing a lot of huge wide receiver contracts. And, a lot of these people were even gulped up that day that it started. But it's interesting to see that it's not so big for positions like running back. There's still a lot of pretty decent running backs, still out there. Do your Panthers need anything in the running back position?
I think theoretically they could use one, but they may not go for one just because if you look at the current market out there now, Adrian Peterson, he's going to have to really gulp down some of his confidence and some of his conviction for what deal he wants, because he's not going to get what he thinks he deserves. And same thing with Jamal Charles. Jamal Charles was a fantastic running back in his heyday. They got Latavius Murray out there too. It really shows what teams' priorities are right now, and throwing the ball is most teams' priority.
I'm surprised that Murray's still out there. I mean, AP and Charles, I understand injury history, but Murray's not that old for a running back, and there's just been no biters so far.
He's kind of a one-trick pony, though. He's a power back, and power backs age a lot faster than other running backs. So I could see him getting picked up for a team and being a potential starter. A lot of Panthers are throwing around that maybe we should go after him, and I'm just like, okay, but we already have Jonathan Stewart, and he does the same stuff. So, it's, especially with the draft that's coming up with the running back position there's a lot of high-level talent that you're going to see in the first 2 rounds there. I just don't see it.
Do you think a lot of these semi-big-name guys are going to be out there until after the draft? I mean, LeGarrette Blount, no one's talked about him yet, and he's clearly not done.
Yeah. The power backs are just tough because a lot of teams use them in such a rotational fashion in very specific situations. So Tom Brady and the Patriots obviously can take pretty much any running back and make them work just because they have one of the best quarterbacks of all time to play behind them, and the focus is always going to be the passing game. I think that we're going to see a lot of running backs go off the market in the next 2 weeks, like Eddie Lacy today, for example, or yesterday with Seattle. I think they're just going to get to a point where they just want to be with a team, because the longer they sit out there and the closer to the draft they get, the less likely they're going to find somewhere place that wants to give them starting money. So
that's true. They might want to just try to get the deal done, now kind of thing. By the way, I considered wanting Lacey for the Pats. I mean, he's a younger Blunt if he could obviously keep his weight in order. It's just a 4-year younger Blunt when he was not thin, because the man was never thin, but when he was keeping his weight under control, he was really good for the Packers. But I mean, if I can't keep my weight under control, I guess it's understandable. I can't get on him a little bit too much. I can't get on him too much. But again, if I was playing for a contract, you might hit the gym, once in a while. So salary cap. It has. You follow this stuff a little bit closer than me because you actually have to write for Cash Scratch Reader. I've noticed that it's gone up a lot, like a team's overall salary cap over the last couple of years.
So my reasoning for that is kind of simple. I mean, overall, just the players are getting paid a lot more now. And the salary cap is essentially the measure of the top 52 players you have, along with a baseline set for how much you can use. So when you get guys like Kirk Cousins who are suddenly walking into $22.5 million deals for 1 year of play, eventually something has to give so that teams can sign players. Because as you know, the NFL is a parity league, and that's why there's very few teams out there that continually dominate the competition. Even the Patriots had that one-off year where they went 11-5, but Brady got hurt. It's in order to keep the NFL like that and to keep it a more engrossing product, you almost have to give teams a little more leverage as to who they can sign and how much they can pay them. And certain positions like the offensive tackle position and quarterback have just reached a breaking point where you have to pay insane amounts of money to sign people, because there is another team out there that will. Like Cleveland, San Francisco. The Jaguars are famous for this at this point. Going full Jags, signing people left to right. There's always going to be that team out there that will overpay for a guy, and then it may not work out for him, but they'll go right back next year and pound their head against a brick wall, So at some point, it's just got to give so teams can really spend, and this was a very interesting year for that.
When Mike Glennon is... I'm trying not to throw numbers out there because it kind of depresses me. I understand I'm not putting my body out there on the line. But let's just put it this way. When Mike Glennon's salary is higher than Tom Brady's next year, you got something going on. I mean, he's top 15 paid quarterback, and he's not terrible, but he's not this is a guy that come on. I mean, we need this drive right now. Mike Glennon, come on. No one would ever say that, and yet he's starting money. He was signed day 2, and it's a multi-year deal and everything. So absolutely insane. When we look at free agency at a whole, what would you say the biggest move that your Panthers have made so far?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and just throw out a few signings, because there's probably a lot of people who, if they're listening to this, don't know what the Panthers did in free agency, because there were so many other teams out there that made moves. So they brought back a couple of key pieces. Defensive end Mario Addison was set to be one of the best pass rushers in free agency at defensive end, and the Panthers brought him back on a 3-year deal. They also, obviously, franchise tag defensive tackle K'Wan Short, who was a Pro Bowler back in the 2015 season. I'm pretty sure he was even pretty close to getting it last year, too. They brought back a couple other depth guys. They brought back Charles Johnson, who's another defensive end of theirs. He was the guy who took over for Julius Peppers when Julius Peppers left. And mentioning Julius Peppers is coming back this year, too.
That's great to see.
Yeah, it really is. It's somebody... A lot of Panthers fans had a sour taste in their mouth with Peppers, but he went out and got paid and made money, got sacks, so it's good to have him back. I would say probably there's 2 guys that I would say are the biggest signings, and one of them is the absolute, this is either going to make or break this team signing, and that's offensive tackle Matt Khalil. He played for the Vikings last year and was drafted by them in the first round. Had a pretty good rookie year, and other than that, has not really been relevant. And there's whispers out there, and coming from him specifically, that he needed hip surgery, and after he got that this year, he feels more agile than he's felt in a long, long time, was the key quotes. So they paid him $55.5 million, a guy who many people didn't think should even be starting in this league is going to be making upper-tier tackle money, which goes back to the previous point about you have to overpay for tackles. The next guy, though, really is going to round out the defense that they have, and that's Captain Munnerlyn. He was a 6th or 7th round pick for them back years ago.
I've legitimately never heard of him.
Never heard of him? Yeah,
no?
he played for the Vikings. He played his first 4 years in Carolina. He was part of the 2013 team that ran the table in the NFC South, went 12-4, made the playoffs, and fell to Colin Kaepernick and the 49ers. He's a nickel corner, and he's really the epitome of exactly where the NFL is going to now. Like, he's not a tall guy. He's very small. He can make plays. He has the most interceptions returned for touchdowns in franchise history for the Panthers, and that's after only 4 years at the team. But he is just a straight-up nickel corner, and they brought him back for 4 years and $21 million, and he's going to play nickel for them. And he is probably the best guy they've ever had at that position because he can blitz. He was really good in pass coverage. He forced turnovers. He's smart. So that guy is really the piece that they've been missing for a while from having a top 2 or 3 defense. It'll really round out their everything for them to have that third piece in the secondary.
Well, I mean, if you look at the nickel corner, it's become such a more relevant piece. I saw some statistic, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but it was something about how last year was either the most teams have ever used the nickel package, or it was up there. And I remember the Pats are one of the teams that used it the most. Just an extra cornerback out there because. Are they going to, is the opposing team going to run the ball? Nah, probably not. They'll probably have 3 wide receivers out there just, spreading the field and everything. So that's becoming huge. I mean, the cornerback position is crazy. And, it gives hope for, like the undersized guys, like someone like, Malcolm Butler or Eric Rowe are like, yeah. I think Eric Rowe's a little bit bigger. So say Butler's like 5'10", 5'11".
Yep.
Yeah, maybe 200 pounds, whatever. That is just a standard guy. But it's like, that's what you need to go against, like, Odell Beckham and Antonio Brown. Obviously, when you have someone like AJ Green, not so much. He's a little bit taller, but, that works for that. So, if we're looking at the key signings over this free agency period, some of them that I would point out that I thought were, like, kind of interesting. Deshaun Jackson going to the Bucks. I think that would be great with Mike Evans down there. I mean, both those together, you got the deep threat and you got the guy who can do everything in Mike Evans. You got Brandon Marshall to the Giants. Again, same thing. You got someone who can kind of do everything out there in Odell, and then you got Brandon Marshall. You put him on the same side of the field. What do you do?
Right.
Mike Glennon, we mentioned, the biggest free agent quarterback, I guess, out there. I mean, when a team last year, this is how starved the NFL is for quarterbacks. When a team last year traded a 4th and a 1st. I had to put the 4th first to make it seem a little bit less crazy. No, a 1st and a 4th. For Sam Bradford, who, like, again, you're like, oh, Sam Bradford's good, like, I have no problems with him, but he's not like, oh, well, you got, Peyton Manning, Sam Bradford, it's like, it's not the same thing. He's a game manager, and they traded, a 1st-round pick, for that guy, so it's crazy. Our local Philadelphia Eagles made some pretty good moves. They signed Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith, 2 pretty good wide receivers. That brings me actually to a point I didn't even have written down. A lot of... I must admit, over the last 5 years, I've only really paid attention to what players have gone to what teams. I don't really care about the contract lengths and all that stuff, but I have noticed this year a lot of players, big players, are signing 1-year contracts. Is this a bigger thing than we've seen before?
I think part of it is teams are starting to get a little bit wiser to overpaying for certain players, and they're looking at guys' production. To bring the Panthers back into the mix, just because this is what I've seen from them ever since Dave Gettleman took over, that I have not seen since or before him, is that he refuses to overpay for players. Like, this year was actually such a surprise at how many moves they made, because he normally was the 1 year, 2 year, we can cut you whenever the heck we want type deal. And I think what it is teams want to make the guys prove it before they give him that kind of money. And it's like, guys like Alshon Jeffrey, for example. Jeffrey's pretty good, but he's also made of glass. Like, teams want to protect themselves from that, from a guy coming in, potentially playing well, and then getting hurt. And Torrey Smith hasn't proved jack since he played for the Ravens.
And those were 2 wide receivers specifically that were not in great QB situations either.
Yeah. And I think Torrey Smith's contract's only worth like $5 million a year. It's like 3 years and $5 million, and
it's nothing. It's nothing.
That's nothing compared to what a lot of the receivers were getting. And I think the 1 year deals are mainly just that teams, the players too, want to maximize what they can get in free agency right now, and ideally, what they look for is the long-term contract. If they don't get it, they might be advised to go prove themselves, prove they're healthy.
Well, it just happened today or yesterday. The Pats signed Rex Burkhead. I'm not too familiar with him. He was on the Bengals.
The Bengals, yeah.
1-year contract.
Yep.
Would that be something in general, if you're looking at it as a fan, that would be more beneficial to the team or more beneficial to the player?
It can be mutually beneficial, only because Burkhead probably took a deal. I've noticed that there have been players out there who could get more from other teams who have taken 1-year deals with contenders instead. And the contender doesn't want to break the bank because oftentimes the contenders are pretty darn good at drafting players. So they don't want to devote a lot of money to a position where they don't even know how good the guy's going to be. I mean, Burkhead was a rotational guy for the Bengals, I think that the 1-year deal type stuff right now is just that I think a lot of teams are seeing some good stuff coming up in the draft too. And they are also breaking the bank at other positions. But when you sign a guy to like a 5-year market resetting contract and then they suck, you're stuck with them, at least for a couple of years. So I think teams are starting to get wiser about that in free agency, and I also think that players are starting to want to be more competitive. Like, you're seeing a lot of the older guys, like Marshall. Jackson's getting up there in age too, like where they don't want to be.
It's hard to believe. Yeah. Deshaun Jackson, you're talking about him being an old wide receiver. That's crazy.
I know, right?
He's still a punk, but he used to be a young punk, you know?
now he's a semi old punk, yeah. And they want to win Super Bowls, like Jackson got paid already by the Redskins, Marshall's been paid before. They want to make money, and they want to make as much as they can, but be on a competitive team. Because Cleveland was throwing out tons of offers to wide receivers because they genuinely need them, and it's just not happening. Like, you're going to have to trade either years on your contract for money or trade wins for that. So
and that's going to be a big topic that we're going to go into a little bit later. You led me right to it, but we're going to hold off of that for right now. My very last point I want to make for these free agent signings is that I'm glad to see Kyle Juszczyk get a nice deal. I think it was out with the 49ers. If you were to say, what's your weakness when it comes to like football, it's fullbacks. I just like fullbacks. Mike Tolbert, for you guys, was like my favorite non-Pat last year because that dude would just he's probably like 5'6", 250, like something insane. Like, he's a very small dude, but he's like he's wide. He's as wide as he is tall. He's just a square out there.
Yep.
And you see him get lost between the tackles who are a foot taller than him, and he breaks out and it's a touchdown. Yep. I love fullbacks. I love their blocking. I love how they rarely ever get any throws or any like stuff like that. It's huge. I really like seeing that. So recently, the biggest, I think, trade that happened so far, and the NFL is not a sport that has a lot of trades, was that the Patriots traded for Brandon Cooks. Now, I must admit that I'm not super, besides people just being like, he's good, I'm not super familiar with him, but he did play in the NFC South. Can you give us just a little bit of what we can expect with him on the Pats?
Brandon Cooks, he's a very solid deep threat, and he's a weapon for sure. He's definitely, I would say, probably a faster and more of a game-breaking weapon than they've had in a while. He's very fast. He's smaller, but he's still got that kind of speed that you really just can't teach. And he's really put it together as a wide receiver. They're going to use him on screens and whatnot, get him open, get him into space, and it's probably going to work out great for him. He's a good player. What
we all imagine is putting Cooks on the outside, having him just run, try to set the top off the defense, and then having Gronk do his Gronkness in the middle of the field. I mean, literally, you have a go route with Cooks on the sideline and a seam route with Gronk in the middle. Maybe Edelman doing a little like zig in the shorter middle of the field. What can you do? Like, legitimately, if again injuries happen and yada yada, but like, what can you do to stop that? Gronk always needs two people on him.
Yep.
So, I mean, you put two people on him, you put your best player or two people on Cooks, well, then who's watching Edelman? I also hope, by the way, I think at this point he probably won't because of the Cooks trade, but I really hope Amendola comes back for the Pats because, I mean, for having like 25 catches last year, every single one of them was like on 3rd and long. I've never seen a player before have like so few stats, but having every stat being huge. It's just, it was kind of nuts to see. So I do hope he comes back. Now, one more Pats thing for me real quick, and then we're going to go into drafting and all that. Have you seen what happened with, or what is happening currently with Malcolm Butler?
Yeah.
Now, you're a little bit more of an insider in me in that you get to, like, talk to people who might have, you know, in inner goings with NFL teams. What do you think's happening with that? Like, what would drive a team to... Butler saying they're not talking to him, and now he's talking about trades. Like, what happens there? Is there a schism? Do teams just not talk to their players?
Well, there's a lot of smoke that gets blown through reporting, and a lot of guys will hear something and make a story out of it. It's very possible that Butler might have said something along those lines, and it got blown up. It's not. Was Butler the one where they tendered him and he didn't sign it? Is that him?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's the if a team wants him, they're gonna have to trade a 1st round pick. It's a 1st round tender. So
he got franchise tagged?
No, he didn't get franchise tagged. I think it's called a first round tender that, because from what I understand.
Oh yeah, you know what?
And then the Pats say the Saints give him an offer, the Pats would have a chance to match it, whatever it is, or the Saints would get him and then have to give up a 1st round pick, is essentially what I understand from that.
Basically what happens with those kind of tenders is, you're right. Like they still have to sign the tender, but once they do, then that's what happens. Is another team can throw the money out. What happened with Butler is apparently he wasn't signing it. And you can't, teams like contractually can't do anything with him. Like the Patriots can't trade him because he's not technically a member of their roster yet until he signs that deal. So him not signing it is essentially the same thing as what happened with Josh Norman last year. Like him not signing it is just putting off the inevitable. So they weren't able to involve him in the Brandon Cooks deal and whatnot. It could just be a lot of blowing smoke because they're negotiating and he or his agent didn't hear what they wanted to from the negotiating table. I wouldn't put too much stock in it because I think he wants to stay with the Patriots, and that's part of why he didn't sign his tender. He's just trying to get as much money out of him as he can.
You know, something I found out interesting, his agent represents no other NFL clients. His agent is a personal injury lawyer that does that on the side, quote, for fun. So yes, his agent is a lawyer, but is one who has never done with this before. So of all, and I was telling someone this the other day, of all people, of all teams to like pull that nonsense on, you got to pick Belichick, the guy who will literally, I mean, the guy who's, you know, trading Deion Branch. You know, Deion Branch is like, I want more. That's you, you know.
Yeah.
Go to the Seahawks. So it's like, of all teams to mess around with, you can go to the Browns and be like, listen, my client, and they'd be like, oh, all right, we need some people, you know, whatever. So I found that super funny. Yeah, I made the same face you did. Like, what? He's not with an actual, I guess it was just someone he knew before he was big, and he's like, I'll use you as my agent. And it's like, apparently the agent is not doing stuff the right way, and it's all sorts of weird. I don't know much about that. So when you look at the way that these GMs have been doing stuff, I always like the way the Patriots work with their players. For instance, in 2014, when Devin McCourty, their safety, was hitting free agency, they let him go out and test the market. They let him go visit teams, you know, see what the market would offer, kind of thing. And they just did that to Dante Hightower. He went out, visited all these teams, tried to get offers, and they both eventually came back and signed with the Patriots. I really like how they do that. How do you feel about how your front office or your GM handles these kind of things with the Panthers?
Dave Gettleman is reminding me a lot more of Bill Belichick than anything recently over the last few years, because obviously the Panthers dealt with something similar with Josh Norman last year, and they ended up rescinding his franchise tag altogether because Gettleman just felt he was going to be a distraction. Gettleman's infamous for not overpaying for players. He typically tries to find those low-risk, high-reward signings where it might be a guy you've never heard of. It might be a guy where you're sitting there like, well, they're too old to be a starter in the NFL, or like they've never proven anything. And then he sticks to that. Like, he uses the free agency to set himself up for the draft so he can truly pick the best player available, where they have somebody who can play the position there. They may or may not be great, like Roman Harper for a while there with the Panthers, but they'll get the job done as long as your core system is there. Gettleman's also infamous for getting rid of guys 1 to 2, maybe 3 years before they would be even considered like over the hill. Steve Smith obviously went to Baltimore, did really good for his last few years, aside from his Achilles tear. He didn't win a Super Bowl, but he got rid of Smith mainly. It was more so about kind of like turning the reins over to Cam Newton, making it his team than anything. But Dave Gettleman was like, "All right, see ya," when he heard about Steve Smith undermining guys like Mike Shula. D'Angelo Williams wanted more money because he was used to getting paid a certain amount, and Dave Gettleman was like, "All right, see ya," and he went to the Steelers. Played very well. Was a great fantasy player whenever he was the starter. Gettleman also likes to let players test the market. His first few years, though, they didn't have the money to pay guys if they went out and tested the market. But right. I think that a good organization and a good GM does allow players to do that, because the grass is greener on the other side is a real mentality. And it's actually kind of funny because the wide receiver from Cleveland from last year, Terrell Pryor. Yeah, he actually had a multi-year, pretty decent deal on the table from Cleveland, chose to go test the market instead, and Cleveland just took the deal back. So then he ended up signing with the Redskins for 1 year. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it's a good deal for them to let players go do that and not really be like, you either take this now or you go, because it allows the player to be like, okay, do I go to a different situation, start all over, not know if it's going to work out, where I know the system here, I know the guys, I don't have to move, like maybe take a little bit less money. The Panthers have pulled it with Charles Johnson for the last 2 years. Guys left money on the field or money on the table to go back to Carolina. And obviously the Patriots are running into that too with some of their players because they just won a Super Bowl. Why wouldn't you want to go back, So I think that's a sign of a good GM, but that has to be piggybacked with good drafting and good personnel decisions anyway.
And it seems to me another thing to add to that is, and this is something no one will know unless they work in the front office, but it seems like communication is key. And some of these worst franchises, it just seems like they communicate very weird with their players or their agents. Like, they don't really, say exactly. It's literally you're you're in an argument, with a girlfriend or whatever. You're like, just tell me, tell me exactly how it needs to be. And then, I'll do it better next time kind of thing. Don't, be like, well, no, everything's fine, no, it's not, so let's work on it, kind of thing. And it seems like you look at a bad team like the Chargers, and, they're just always a mess with what's going on. It's like, oh, this player's unhappy with whatever, whatever. Like with the Patriots or even the Panthers, you don't see it too often where it's like player X is unhappy and they're being dumb and talking to the media about it. If that does happen with Josh Norman, it's like, see ya, kind of thing. So I don't know why some team, it seems like you have to not only be good at evaluating talent, but be good at just talking to people and be like, you're a player, man. Let's work on this. Let's figure this out. Rather than being like, well, we won't call you kind of thing. If you find it, you find it. It seems like that's key to that. I wish we could see a Hard Knocks of a front office would be actually really amazing, even better than the players for me. So let's move on to the draft. The draft comes up. I think it's late April this year.
It's usually late April.
That. Yeah, the 1 year they had it early for whatever reason. So historically. And this is a broad-ranging question. How have the Panthers drafted?
They've generally hit pretty well. Their first 10 years were tough because they were trying to find the players that would be generational, franchise cornerstones. And for a new organization, that's just not easy to do. Eventually, they started hitting on guys like Steve Smith was a third-round pick. Musa Muhammad was a great pick. They found Jake Delhomme as an undrafted free agent after he left the Saints. They found guys like Deshaun Foster. They found Jordan Gross. They actually managed to leapfrog the Vikings for him because the Vikings took too freaking long to pick him. Luke Kuechly could potentially end up being considered one of the best linebackers of all time by the end of his career. He's playing that well.
The way we're sitting right now, 2017, what's the best, all things considered, where it was and who it was, best Panthers draft pick ever? I mean, for the Pats, it's easy. It's silly, but it's easy.
Mine,
Tom Brady, 199, but they were lucky with that, you know?
Yeah. Mine would probably be, if we're looking at historical statistics, Julius Peppers is going to be considered one of the best pass rushers of all time.
Where was he picked?
He was picked in the first round.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a very high pick in the first round. They got a lot out of him, and he's going to be on the top 10 in sacks overall by the end of his career. Obviously, Cam Newton is the one guy who really changed things for Carolina. They were always a aftermarket team. Nobody knew who the heck they were, who played for them. Then you bring Cam Newton in. He's a face that people know. He's a player that people will just watch him just because of how different he is. He's revolutionized the way the quarterback position is played, and he's really brought a different kind of feel to how quarterbacks should conduct themselves. So if I had to go with what affected the organization the most, I would say Cam Newton by a landslide.
So overall, I mean, they've gone to Super Bowl but not won it yet. That was the right decision. That was one of their best decisions ever. Despite only having the number 1 pick, that was it for that.
That was definitely their best pick for sure, as far as like what changed the path for them. Luke Kuechly is probably a close second, but Cam Newton is when you hear Carolina Panthers, you think of
That's
Cam
true.
Newton.
He's synonymous at this point now. He really is. Would you say he's their best player of their franchise history?
Oh, he very well might be by the end of his career. I would say at the moment, probably Julius Peppers, just because the body of work is so large and consistent, where Cam Newton's only technically had 2 winning seasons to his name as a quarterback, and that's a big deal. When he's played well, he's played really freaking well, like takes over the game darn near dominant, but he's getting up there in age, so he really needs to evolve as a quarterback, where Peppers and Steve Smith both have a consistent career, but their positions aren't as big of a deal as quarterback either. So
if we're looking at the 2017 draft right now with whatever pick that they have, the 12th, 15th, something like that, 8th.
Yeah.
What player are you looking at if they're still on the board?
I would say I really would like to see Leonard Fournette taken there. The running back from LSU.
I'm not huge on college football, but I would watch some LSU games just to see him, and like, man, running back is so tough when you're evaluating college because like the defense they're playing against, unless you're against Alabama, is like trash. You know what I mean? It is not even close compared to the NFL, but that guy's got some moves. That guy, he seems like almost like an AP type of thing going on there, you know. Big, strong. He proved to everybody he can run really fast. He's athletically one of the best prospects since Adrian Peterson to come out. And a lot of Panthers fans are like, well, we need an offensive tackle, or well, we should draft the tight end O.J. Howard, who is also one of the best tight end prospects to come out in a long time too. But I look at just the general Panthers mentality, which is they run the ball down your throat, whether it's Cam Newton or Jonathan Stewart or whatever. They are a power rushing team. And if they really want to make Cam Newton less of the focal point of the rushing game, that's how you do it. You take a guy like Leonard Fournette with the 8th pick. You led me to my next question. Drafting for need or best player available?
You know, that's a very hotly contested subject in the drafting community, because there's a lot of people that say they go in, they're like, this is the board that I have, so this is the best player available at this spot if the draft falls this way. So you always get a lot of people throwing their hands up in the air like, why would they draft them? And it's been really interesting to see Dave Gettleman's career so far as a GM, because he seems to always go with the best player available in the first round. That said, his first 2 seasons, he had darn near home runs sitting there for him. He had Star Lotulelei at defensive tackle, which they needed a defensive tackle, so he was there. They got him. Then they needed another defensive tackle who was more of a pass rusher. K'Wan Short was there in the second round. They took him. They were both no-brainers.
So they got lucky where it was both. It was, if we need this, and it is the best guy.
Yeah, last year was really the head-scratcher of it, because the first round they took defensive tackle Vernon Butler. The 2 guys that I just named from Dave Gettleman's first year are still there. So you don't play with 3 defensive tackles on the field at the same time, so they would play with a rotation, obviously. That was really a best player available pick at almost its purest form, because Dave Gettleman thought the guy would go in the top 15, and he was sitting there at 30. So 30 or 31.
31, I would guess,
Yeah.
unless you traded out of it.
No, it was a first round pick. It
Okay, so it'd be
was.
31 because 30 seconds the winner
Was
of
the
Super Bowl.
Broncos? That's right. Yeah, I didn't remember somebody got docked a first round pick last year or not.
Oh yeah, it would be 30 actually.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Don't troll me on this. that was actually pretty good. So yeah, it would actually be 30. I guess that's how they did that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would.
But they then proceeded to last draft 3 consecutive cornerbacks following Josh Norman's thing, and there's this whole thing about how James Bradbury was the best rookie corner according to a lot of grading sites last year. He was Pro Football Focus graded him their best rookie corner last year. So it looks like it was best player available, but at the time it looked like he was like, we need corners right freaking now, so we're drafting them. And they all turned out to be okay. But I think the best way to really look at it is you really got to blend it. You got to pick the best player available for your team. Not just like the best overall talent. You need to draft the best player, the player who's going to have the highest upside for you. And the other thing is, you got to look at it as, where are you looking at the draft pick too? The first round should be a guy that's going to be high impact for you, whether it's they're going to be high level backup who needs some work, but they got a lot of potential, or they need to come in and contribute right away. Second and third round, you could look, you hope to get starters out of it, but you also could just try to find some more talent. And then the fourth, fifth, sixth rounds, you're just looking at what guys can do that help them win, not what they can't do. So I think towards the end of the draft, you really got to go best player available, just because you're more likely to get someone who will end up on a roster. But first, second, and third round, I think you can go a little needy, but don't reach too much based on what you have there. Like if you need a corner and you need a running back, and you have, like, let's say you need 2 corners and then you need 1 running back, and there's a high level corner there, but there's a running back that you grade better, take the running back in the first round. But it's so tough, and it's really just a matter of how they evaluate specific players.
Well, and you mentioned, drafting a player that fits your scheme. One of the things that people will always, give Tom Brady and the Patriots is, oh, it's the system he's in, it's the scheme that he's in. Well, if that's the case, then my question is, why don't all teams have a system or a scheme? There's some teams out there that you're like, what are you? Like the Bucs are a great example. They had the number 1 pick with Jameis Winston, who I still think is pretty good. I don't think he's like a generational talent, but I've seen him do some like really great things that you're like, oh wow, But then with that team, you're like, okay, what are you? Because you have this great D line, you have this great, pretty good defense overall, and like sometimes they come out and they're like, man, this is a defense oriented team first. Like Jameis will do enough to get them to win, but the defense will do great. And then other times they come out and they're like tossing the ball 45 times, and it's just like, you look at a team like that and you're like, what are you? Are you like a pass happy offense with a great quarterback? Are you like a running team with like a Doug Martin or whatever? Like, what are you? You look at the Panthers, and I think Panthers, I think it's exactly what you put. I think you are run first, but we'll play action you into long plays. A chunk. It's either it's in the passing game, it's chunk plays, and in the rushing game, it's to keep the clock moving, and that makes sense. But there's other teams out there that I'm like, what are you? What are you doing? Yeah. So they take best player of it. It'd be like everyone was like, oh, the Pats should pick up AP. What? Like, I cannot think of a single person in the world of football, I don't care how talented he is, that fits less well with the Patriots than Adrian Peterson. Yep. Like, he just doesn't. Like, he always runs out of the I form or the single back. He doesn't do a lot of shotgun stuff. Well, the Pats do a lot of shotgun stuff. He fumbles a lot. Guess what the Pats don't like? Like everything you can check it, and you're like, I don't care if he was literally like 25 years old right now. I wouldn't want him on the team. He just doesn't fit. Yep. It just is what it is. So that's actually a really good point, and a lot of teams might do literally best player available, but it's like, well, you drafted Leonard Fournette, but you have, you have Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees throw the ball 55 times a game. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's a really great point, and I think that to best illustrate what you're talking about, I'm going to look at Colin Kaepernick and Cam Newton over the course of their careers. So they're both similar. They're both guys who can run. The Panthers drafted Cam Newton number 1 overall. He was by far the most talented player in that draft. Von Miller was a close second, but Cam Newton was a guy...
I don't think there was any question that they were going to... Like, it was just like a month before they were like, they're going to take Cam number 1.
Yeah, because he's just such... such a game-breaking talent. They've never seen a quarterback like him before at that time. And Michael Vick was the closest one, but he was not 6'6", 250 pounds, you know. So you look at him and you look at Colin Kaepernick. So Cam Newton starts, they build their system around him. And granted, it didn't work. They didn't win a whole lot of games to begin with, but Cam Newton was throwing lights out like to begin his career. He was playing real well, putting up a lot of good stats. Then Rob Chudzinski goes to the Browns, where his career went to die, and they continue to use the same system though. Like Mike Shula just took the system, took out this weird read option base that Rob Chudzinski was using, but for the most part had the same system. And Cam Newton just aside, like last year was tough because people look at it as he stepped back when I say he was getting killed all game. But
he was. From day one, he was getting killed all game.
He steadily progressed, though, and that's where you see that he became Super Bowl MVP against like all odds the one year when Kelvin Benjamin went down and they had Ted Ginn as their number one freaking receiver. Then you look at Colin Kaepernick, and Jim Harbaugh made the system to fit him. And he wasn't even supposed to start right away. It was Alex Smith.
That's right.
But when Kaepernick got in there, they built the system to his strengths. So it was mostly like read option, play action, 1 to 2 reads. Then you look at what happened after he left, and the system wasn't made for him. Like it was made. A lot of coaches out there try to take players who are talented and make them fit a certain system. And I think that's exactly what happened with Kaepernick. That's what happened with RG3 after his first year. They forced them to be something they're not, where the best teams with the best coaching staffs are going to take a player and truly build it around him. When they say, we want to build our team around this guy, that also includes coaching.
Right. Oh my gosh, and that's why, like, I think the worst NFL coach I have ever seen in my life, considering all that he did, is Chip Kelly.
Yeah.
Like, legitimately, like, I know he's buds with Bill Belichick and everything, but, like, I hate his up-tempo, weird, dumb offense. Now, seeing Kaepernick run that was, like, the grossest thing possible. Like, it was just, like, he goes from the Eagles, where he has this totally different team, right? And he goes to the 49ers with this totally different team and doesn't change a single thing about how he runs anything.
Nope.
And it's like, that to me is the sign of being the worst coach.
Yep.
You know, like Belichick, like Brady goes down or whatever, and all of a sudden it's, that's a great example. Jacoby Brissett, somehow the third string started the week 3 game against the Texans. So what kind of game did they play? Ground and pound, blunt it up. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
It was, hey, you need to throw the ball 10 times. You know, use your legs kind of thing. And then guess what? Brady comes back and all of a sudden, what is it? Totally different. Because that's what coaching is supposed to do. I mean, that's a great point.
Yep.
You know, and of course Kaepernick's going to do terrible in this terrible Chip Kelly offense that it's like the Wildcat. It worked for like half a year and then people were like, okay, we got game tape on it. Well, now we're not dumb, you know.
And really, just to interject as far as Chip Kelly goes, the funniest thing and the best example of that exact point is DeMarco freaking Murray.
Oh my goodness.
Because he played with the Cowboys, great running back, put the team on his back, you know, as a runner. They had a great offensive line. He went to Philadelphia. It's not like their offensive line sucked there at the time. Like they had a good one.
Yeah.
But Chip Kelly took DeMarco Murray, who is if you look it up in the dictionary, the football dictionary, what a north and south runner is, you would see a picture of DeMarco Murray's face. And they could not make it work for him. He had an absolutely horrid career with them. Then he went to Tennessee, who is a team that's like, is just trying to drag themselves out of the abyss, and he had 1,000 yards, several touchdown season. He had a great season. You want to know why? Because they did what he should be doing, you know? Like,
I don't... You have Chip Kelly's offense, and you get like a Deion Lewis or a James White, something like that. Darren Sproles was a great fit for them, but he was there before. Of course, Chip Kelly was there. But like, you don't get someone like that and go, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to run 3 plays in 45 seconds, and then we're going to punt the ball. And every time we give it to you, it's going to be this weird outside handoff where you're going to try to go around all these different tackles and stuff like that. It's like, well, or you could just be good and run it up the middle and just blow through people. You know, like once in a while they'll have LeGarrette Blount on the Pats, you know, do like an outside run, and it'll be it either doesn't work or it's like 30 yards. There's no in between. But the rest of the time it's like, hey, you're like 270 pounds. Just run up the middle and just blow through people. Thanks. You know, appreciate it. So another fantastic point, and that just goes to show, you know, you're drafting DeMarco Murray and you're the Eagles with Chip Kelly, do you want to draft a running back like that? No, just in the 5th round, pick up, James White was picked in the 4th round. Just pick up a James White. Just a small dude that's like, he can go in between anywhere and it's fine. So absolutely, absolutely fantastic point there. Now, we're going back to the draft here after my Chip Kelly hate is done. Oh my God, I hate him. Yeah, one more thing about Chip Kelly. It was week 1 against the Falcons, obviously the year when he was still with the Eagles, and it was tied, or they needed a field goal to go up by a couple points, right? And they're like pretty much within field goal range, and they're at the point, kind of like the Falcons were in the Super Bowl, where it's just like, just run some plays, just choose some clock, and even if you kick the field goal, you're not giving them more than like 40 seconds. And you know what they're doing? They're hurrying up. They're running the ball with 25 seconds left, 20 seconds left on the clock. They end up kicking the field goal around the 2-minute warning, and guess what happens? The Falcons go down the field and kick a field goal and win because you give them too much time. I mean, like, when I saw that, I was like, wow, Chip Kelly is the worst. Like, it's worse than even what I'm saying, because I was just like, man, all they really need to do is just, like, not, like, hurry up. And of course, what they do is they hurry up. So that's my last Chip Kelly. The worst. When I heard that, like, he's friends with Belichick, I was like, Billy, please. Billy, please. Like, you could even bring him around to be like, hey, he's just kind of hanging around watching the guys. Great. Just don't give him, like, a coaching job. Okay, so when we're talking the draft, I know football isn't an exact science, and we're seeing this, I think, more and more as the years goes on. How can we have these huge contributors like Antonio Brown, who was picked in the 5th or 6th round, Malcolm Butler, undrafted free agent, Kurt Warner, bagging groceries free agent, go undrafted or go drafted real late? Is this a matter of we're not seeing them, the front offices aren't seeing them in the right situations, or do sometimes just every team just miss?
I think some of it has to do with late. I do firmly believe that there's such a thing as late bloomers in football. Because a good example is Mike Adams for the Colts. He was an undrafted free agent. He was a mid-level starter when he came in, and that was still impressive considering he was an undrafted free agent. But then, like, last year and in 2014 and 2015, he was playing with the Colts. He's been in the league since 2004. He's, like, having, like, 5 interception seasons, like, 9 total turnovers, makes the Pro Bowl in 2014, and you're just like, well, what happened? Like, some players just aren't quite ready for, like, aren't ready for the mental aspects of it. And it just takes some time. Like, and it could be in college. It could be even their first year in the league. Like, most of the time what happens with the draft is teams are looking for what they consider to be the most sure thing. They are looking for the most athletic players. They're looking for the guys who check off a lot of check marks. There's guys who don't get drafted as defensive backs because they don't backpedal correctly. Like Josh Norman was a good example. They didn't like the way he does this weird, like, shuffle slide maneuver instead of backpedaling, and it's like it worked out for him eventually. But for every one of those cases where some guy doesn't fit the athletic profile you're looking for, or has a technique issue, like a foundational problem, for every one of those guys, there are thousands of players where they never get over that. So you're always going to see players who end up being undrafted. And we all know, like, just for a player to be undrafted in the NFL is still hugely impressive, because it's the best of the best of the best of the best. Like, it's not something where you get some scrub who comes in. Like, they all can play. That's why some teams will fill in a running back with just some undrafted free agent scrub off the street, and that guy won't be in the league 2 years later, but he scored a couple touchdowns in that one game. They're all athletic. So what it comes down to is work ethic, your off the field behavior, and generally just how much you can improve. And some players improve a lot more than others.
You led me perfectly to my next question. You're the Panthers GM. Situation. Player A is unbelievably talented, but is a slight head case. He's going to need extra work mentally, pretty much what you were just talking about. Player B is average or even below average in talent, but able to learn quickly. He's a team player, and he's an exceptionally hard worker. Let's say they both play the same position. Who are you picking?
Well, that's a tough one.
See, I gotta pass it up and just say I want someone who will follow my every waken. Let's look at this let's make this video game rated for 1 second. Okay, so I'm hiring at CIB. I have 2 people. I have a guy who's like, I know everything about video games of all time. You know, you don't need to teach me because I don't need to know, kind of thing. And he's just kind of like, I'll be like, he's going to be rude to customers once in a while, but if someone asks a question, he's going to know, but he might end with like, you know, kind of thing. Or I have someone, and I've done this before, who I've hired people who are like, I really don't know much about games, but like, you teach me, I'll learn, kind of thing. I'm taking B every day, every single day. And I understand it's a little different when we're talking athletics, but I'm taking someone who's like, hey, I have a good attitude, and I'm willing to learn, but I don't know anything about it, but I'll learn, kind of thing. I will take that all day, every day.
Part of the reason why players will fall so far due to head concerns is because, once again, for every one of those guys who's a head case, you might have an Aaron Hernandez next, you know? Like, so it's tough. And the other thing specifically is that teams that get burned by a player like that are far less likely to make that pick soon after that. Like, Greg Hardy's a great example. Like, a lot of Panthers fans are like, well, why are we going to draft Leonard Fournette when this kid Joe Mixon's going to be available in the second round due to the fact that he punched a girl in the face at a bar?
You just went through that.
Yeah, and it's like, we just went through that. And we paid Greg Hardy $15 to $16 million for one sack. One freaking sack. because then he got put on the commissioner's exempt list. And, you know, it just depends on, like, I think that's part of why you do see the Patriots occasionally take that risk, because they don't necessarily get hurt too bad by it if it happens. Like, they didn't really get a whole lot of flack, as far as I could see, for the Aaron Hernandez thing, because that had nothing to do with football. And it was like, he just killed. They couldn't control that. They immediately, like, get out. You're done. You're done as a Patriot. We don't care if you're guilty or not. You're done.
Right.
Like, so it just depends on how much that team really needs a player like that. So I think I agree that I would go with the guy who's willing to work hard, only because you also need to look at it as far as, like, when things get tough, who's going to come out and make a play for you, or who's going to rally the team. And the guys who are going to work hard and have a good head on their shoulders, and you don't have to worry about them with the media, it's just far less of a headache for you, and then it causes far less criticism, because GMs are, in the social media day and age, they're constantly under criticism, no matter what they do. I guarantee there was some Patriots fan out there complaining because the Falcons almost won that game. Like,
we need a better defense now. You know? You know, and another thing is, two of my favorite Pats, you know, are Brady, 6th round, and Edelman, which was like a 7th round player, and they're constantly like, Brady, like, will always say about, he's won 5 Super Bowls, but he'll always be like, you were picked 199th. Teams passed on you, 32 teams passed on you, you know, 5 times overall. And it's one of those things where if you get that going, you get that fire going on them, it'll never really go, because there's always that little bit that's like,
chip on your shoulder.
That was like, I was undrafted. Teams passed on me 7 times. You know, teams were picking these guys that never played a snap in the NFL, you know, and now I'm here, kind of thing. So there is always that too, that you can kind of, if you have the right mentality, just kind of get in there. We're talking picks. Let's talk bad picks. Biggest bust you've ever seen in Panthers history?
Well, probably Ray Caruth, because he hired a guy to kill his girlfriend after being a 1st round pick.
Right.
That sucks.
I'm kind of. When was this? Like, roughly
2000,
mid
early 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm kind of remembering this. So
yeah. He was supposed to be the big time wide receiver. I believe he may have been before. I don't remember exact times and dates with him, but I just know he was a big deal. He had a moderately okay first year, and next thing you know, you hear about how he hired a hitman, and he's in jail. You know, like, that was a big one. Tim Biakabatuka was supposed to be a big time running back for them, and he never worked out either. It's just, it happens so much, you know. Like,
especially
I would say
running backs are very, very tough.
Yeah, I would say Caruth by far, just because the idea with him was for him to be like the game-breaking wide receiver and like one of the top receivers in the league, only for him to just completely mess it up with literally nothing, almost nothing to do with football. So
it's such a shame. I mean, you know, once in a while, you know, I'll be watching old Pats tape and I'll see Hernandez, and like, Aaron Hernandez, people will forget, because he is an evil human being who done absolutely terrible things. He was a good football player.
Yeah,
he was a really good football player. In fact, when he was on the field at the same time as Gronk, it was kind of like Gronk was second.
Yep.
You know, I mean, and you just imagine, like, wow, you know, once the Pats started building up that defense, 2013, 2014, you know, having both of them would have been phenomenal. And it's just crazy how like that, and that's a whole topic for another day, but like just throwing that kind of stuff away, and it's like you had so much. Why'd you have to do that? You're so that's something for another day. So recently, over the last couple of years, we've seen, especially after the Sam Bradford thing in 2010, rookie deals are getting a little less crazy, because back before the last CBA, you would sign like the number 1 pick overall, and you'd have to sign them to a certain amount of money over a certain amount of years, and it's much, much less crazy. Because less capital is involved with these things, would you say that there's less risk nowadays in high draft picks?
Yeah, for sure. When they implemented the new rookie wage scale in the CBA, the new collective bargaining agreement that they signed right before the lockout, or during the lockout, I should say. And so now players can only make a certain amount. Now the only reason you ever see contract negotiations at a standstill is because of the language of the contracts. How much money am I going to get up front? Stuff like that. But for the most part, it's guaranteed. But you also get that beautiful 5th-year option that the player really has no option of taking it or not. So honestly, like a high draft pick is actually a really big thing to have, because you get what could be a really great player for the first 5 years of his career, or 4 years if it's anybody else. So draft picks are, because of the fact that you don't have to sign players to what's considered the running rate for that specific position, not nearly as risky anymore. That's why
it seems like there's less huge busts nowadays. Like, so you'll be like, oh, that guy busted, like 2, 5, 7 years ago, or 2, 3, 5 years ago. But like a lot of the big ones you think of, like Sam Bradford was number 1 overall. He's a good quarterback, but they had to invest a lot of money into him. So in a way, you're like, oh, if he was number 1 and he only got he didn't hamper the team down, it's a little less bad for that. So yep. I always thought that's interesting when you look back and you're like, oh man, Bradford had to be signed for a ton of money without playing one single second. So again, let's play GM here for a second. We're talking draft. You're sitting there. Would you rather stockpile draft picks to actually pick players, or would you be one that in general is kind of using them as trade bait for established players?
I really like what I've seen. I think part of the problem with that the issue there is you have to figure out where your team's at. If I'm the Cleveland Browns, stockpiling draft picks makes a ton of sense, because you're more likely to hit on a player if you have a bunch of draft picks. But there are teams also, like the Patriots, Panthers, where they have a lot of positions where they have guys there where even if you draft a solid player, they may still not play. Like, the Panthers have this guy, Trey Boston, safety. He was a 4th-round pick. He's been a starter for them at times. He's not that great, but he's okay. Like, for a team like Cleveland, he would probably be a full-time starter for him. It's like
a lot of the Pats mid-round picks are safeties. It's a joke, but it is a thing, and they end up playing a lot of special teams, but not sniffing the normal field.
So part of it is, when you're looking at it, do you really need that number of players to fill out your roster with talent, or are you looking to find the players that you really want? And you don't see a lot of draft pick trades anymore where it's like straight up player for draft pick. Like, you see a lot of teams flipping draft picks and involving players, or you may see a team give up a draft pick back in order to get a draft pick and a player or something like that. So I think that what you're more likely to see is teams trading up, like gathering draft capital just to trade up in the draft, and when they see a guy that they really want. Gettleman's done it 3 or 4 times in the last 3 drafts, where he's traded up to get a player that he considers to be like a steal at that position.
Well, I mean, the whole point of the draft is to maybe get, like, what do you have? Usually 6 to 8 picks, something like that. You want to get 3 or 4 players that will stay on your team. I'm guessing. Yeah. That 50% chance of them being on your team maybe 2 years from now seems pretty dang good. Yeah. So I can totally see that, and we'll get into the Browns in a second. So considering going back to the NFC South, considering a new team wins the NFC South every year, who you got early on? It's early on. It's very, very early, but who you got?
That's a tough one. I made a joke out of this when the Falcons got beat by the Patriots, but I said that apparently the new formula for the Super Bowl is a new NFC South team runs the table in the NFC completely out of nowhere to get beat by a veteran quarterback. So my Super Bowl pick right now is the Bucs to run the table in the NFC only to lose to the Steelers in the Super Bowl.
Well, no one wants to see that.
But
except for Steelers fans.
That said,
so do you honestly think the Bucs are having, a decent chance to win the South this year?
I think that the Falcons have the best chance. That said, I think the Panthers are going to give them a lot more of a run than they should than a lot of people anticipate too. I think that you may see a situation where there's 3 teams in the NFC South, and one of them may or may not be the Panthers, because the Saints are making some shrewd moves right now too. I could see it being a three team race for the playoffs, and potentially seeing 2 of them in the playoffs, potentially 3, 2 of them being in the wild cards. But obviously, the Falcons just did only really the Patriots could really stop them. And they still have that.
That's such a good team. Yeah. I mean, and the thing that surprised me most about, I haven't seen the Falcons too much until the Super Bowl. The thing that impressed me so much was, and we heard about it all week, was the speed of their defense. All I heard all week was, okay, well, the Falcons aren't great at tackling, so they'll get the Pats will get the run after catch yards, and that's what they do. You get Edelman, you get in space, you get an extra 10 yards. There you go, kind of thing. Every play caught, done. No missed tackles, no anything until obviously near the end of the game, but for the first 3 quarters, it was wow, this defense is everywhere.
Yep.
So I could totally see them, kind of doing well. So I guess every team for you, for that, it's a very close division, it seems like it. There's no clear, terrible team there, anymore.
Nope. Every team has a franchise quarterback. Every team has reasons why every team has certain things that make them the best in the NFL at that specific thing. So,
well, and if you look at the overall, if you're talking about early, again, it's very early for wild cards. I don't think the NFC West is going to get a wild card. The Seahawks are pretty good. The other teams aren't super great right now.
No.
NFC North, you might have the Lions, but I'm not convinced about the Vikings or obviously the Bears. And the NFC East, I was having an argument with one of our friends. He was trying to troll me, but I was trying to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Saying there's these 3 teams and the Redskins. And, everyone's saying, oh, well, they're going to send 3 teams to the playoffs and whatever. It's when you have 3 teams that are real good, a lot of times what you see is they're beating up on each other. So you see these 3-3 division records. So it's okay, right there, automatically you have 3 losses.
Yep.
So, you're automatically there, and I don't think you're going to run the table and everything else. So I could see the NFC East, again, even though you have 3 good teams and 1 not so great team right now, just beating up on each other and having a 10-6 division winner, and having the other teams being 8-8. You can have some really good teams, but if they're whooping up on each other all year round,
yep,
it's a little bit tougher on that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like any team really ever consistently dominates the entire division. For God's sake, the Giants beat the Cowboys twice last year. Yeah,
I bet on that game just a little bit. I did okay on that.
Nice.
I was like, you know what? Let's parlay this Giants thing, with the Pats. So it was go Giants just for 1 week. So if we're talking teams, again, this is very early, but teams ready to turn the corner this year and vastly improve where they're sitting. I'll give you mine first. We got an NFC South team, the Bucs. I really feel like they could really turn the corner here. I don't know why I feel this way, because the Lions did make the playoffs as a wild card, but I feel like they could, if everything keeps going good and everyone is remain unhurt, could be a team that does that. And my big one, and I pick them to win the AFC South every year because the Colts are terrible and the Texans literally do not have a quarterback at this point, the Titans.
Yeah.
I feel like the Titans could be a pretty good team next year.
Yeah, them losing Mariota really screwed them. I would say those are all very good choices. I agree, for sure. I would say that the number 1 team that really scares me is the Vikings. As much as people want to hate on them, for the first quarter to half of last season,
they went 5-0 to start off.
And they were a scary-looking team because they had a very good defense. That defense, Xavier Rhodes was darn near close to the best corner in the league for almost the entire season. And they have a very scary front 7. The only issue is that they just didn't have an offensive line. Their offensive line killed Bradford all year, and they didn't have Peterson when they expected him to be there. Now they're going to finally go forward with either an Adrian Peterson, but they don't have nearly as much invested in him, or a new running back altogether. And then they have some good wide receivers there. They have their tight end. I think the Vikings are my number one pick for a team that could easily turn the corner.
And I gotta say, as someone who would not be adverse to the Vikings doing well, I hope they don't bring AP back, because once again, to get to AP, I feel like when you have him on your team, you focus on him too much, especially at this point in his career. So, yeah. Do you feel any? So that was an NFC team. Do you feel like any AFC team out of nowhere could come out and challenge the Pats this year?
Probably the Titans, honestly. That if I were to bet money on it, I would say that the Titans are probably the one team where I could look at them and say that team has the ability to beat a lot of teams in the NFL.
It's a sexy pick. They're a good team. I mean, Mariota is literally, he's like a step above doing exactly what you need to win the game. I mean, they've won some games and he has some gaudy numbers where it's like 10 for the one they won, it was like 8 for 17 and they won. And it's like, if you can win when your quarterback goes 8 for 17, it's like you can beat a lot of teams.
Yep,
you can beat a lot of teams. So let's flip this the other way around. Teams that you think could lose a step or two. I'm going to give 2, and then hopefully I don't take all your teams up from you. I think the Colts could lose a step or two for 2 reasons. I hate the Colts. And Andrew Luck, for being the golden child that everyone was, going nuts over for a long period of time, has been hurt frequently, and they just don't do a great team around them. Now, they don't have Ryan Grigson, the GM, anymore, so that could be something where they start down the line to have good people around him, but there's not enough time, in one offseason to do that. So I could see the Colts kind of becoming like a 7-9 or 6-10 kind of team. And then the other one, I'm going to say either the Chiefs or the Raiders. And the reason I'm saying that is I just cannot see another in a division like that, another where it's like, oh, one team has 12 wins and one has 11. They beat up on each other too much. I don't know which one it's going to be, because I really believe in Derek Carr. I would kind of more think the Chiefs, on that. But I don't think both those teams can be as high as they were last year. No. I left out the most obvious one for you, though, so have that home run.
Well, my big one would be actually the Falcons. They played real well last year. They did. And most of that came from the fact that Matt Ryan was playing out of his freaking mind every Sunday. He set a record for most touchdowns given to thrown to other receivers, or throughout he set an NFL record for most touchdowns thrown to different receivers in the league ever. And They have a really good run game. Obviously, their defense was good when it needed to be, and that's what kind of one of those formulas for real good winning teams anymore in the league is teams where their offense is great, but their defense is like just enough where they can force a few turnovers to stop a team in a pinch. But there were games where Matt Ryan was so close to getting sacked against the Panthers that it just drove me crazy, because it wasn't like he was getting great protection. He was just moving around the pocket in such a way that he was able to buy himself time. That offensive that I think the Patriots really figured out what to do against them, and they took a lot of chances. And the fact that Shanahan will no longer that was Kyle Shanahan, right?
That was Kyle Shanahan calling it, yeah.
The fact that he's no longer around is going to change some things too. I think that they are probably my pick to take a step back. I definitely don't see them dominating the NFC like they did last year.
What did they go? 13-3, 14-2, 12-4, something like that?
Yeah, they were pretty darn close to matching what the Panthers did the year before.
It's hard to win 12-13 games in a division like that. It just is.
No.
And I remember a lot of those games where, when you're playing these games and all of them are real close like that, it's tough to have that. Saw the Panthers, in that 15-1 year 2 years ago. Every single game that was close, that was decided by one play and went in their favor. The next year you have those games, you have 6 of those games, 5 of them go against you. Well, you're a 10-5, you're 9-6 team at this point, and
yep.
that's a huge difference. Again, we talked about that earlier. I'm surprised you didn't say the Cowboys. They lost a lot of defense. I think almost all their defensive players, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, they lost 2 of their O-line members.
They lost Barry Church, Mo Claiborne, Brandon Carr. I think they may have lost Terrell McClain, who was a starting defensive tackle. I know they lost at least one offensive lineman. I know that. I think it may have been like Doug Free or something.
I think you're right on that.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And that O-line was the key to their team, clearly.
Yeah.
So even having one person missing is, can be tough.
They've just had this weird way of having fielding a defense where it's not really that good on paper, but it somehow manages to do. It was Pro Football Focus or something had them as the number one secondary, and if you would bet money on that, like what's the number one secondary? Let me think about it. You would never say the Cowboys. It would not be a thing. It's just Pro Football Focus is a lot about tendencies, and they go by every given play. A lot of times I agree with some of their evaluations and disagree with others. They look at every player on every given play in a total vacuum. Like it doesn't matter if that guy, there was a cornerback on one side and the offense ran a toss to the right side, that corner could get graded positively for that play because of how he took on the block. So
gotcha. So it's a very technical analysis.
They grade based. I think they grade defensive backs based on certain tendencies a lot of times, and a play where the receiver just flat out doesn't catch the ball for whatever reason can end up being a really good play for a corner based on the way they grade it. So. I definitely think the Cowboys have a very good defensive coach, and that they did a great job of running with what they had and catering to their strengths. So that said, they're going to have to find some corners, definitely. So.
Yeah, and again, in a division like that, it's just hard to run the table like that. So we're heading up to the final year. We're just going to head into some random NFL questions as we hit the off season. So right now we're sitting. We just picked your NFC South favorites. Give me your Super Bowl. I think you already did, but let's have that. Let's have that as your final answer. Now, I know I just said I don't feel like the Cowboys will be there, but the one I would love to see the most would be Pats versus Cowboys. I mean, legitimately would be, I think every Super Bowl going on is the most watched game of all time, but the Cowboys are so much bigger than you think. When they started doing well, we live in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which is pretty far from Texas, and you see so many Cowboys fans. I mean, dude, the Pats have had more continued success more recently, and there's a fraction of Pats, and we're way closer to New England, to Foxborough than we are, there, and there's still so many more Cowboys fans. The Cowboys are absolutely huge. That would be the most watched game of all time. It would be absolutely absurd. Even if it wasn't close, it would be absolutely absurd.
Yep, it's really early. Obviously, the draft hasn't even happened yet. I really have a hard time picking a team other than the Patriots in the AFC, just because the only team that I think could beat them is the Steelers, just because Ben Roethlisberger has seen enough of the game that doesn't really matter what Belichick throws at him, he's still going to score points.
And I totally respect him, and he's got that magic, so I could feel that. I mean, the difference there could be where they're playing the game.
Yeah, exactly. In the NFC, I don't know if I see it with Seattle, because I feel like they don't have the rushing attack that they used to.
And you got to hope that you got to think about Earl Thomas coming back from that broken leg, and
that's a big
deal. He's the most underrated defensive person I can think of in the last 10 years. When you're talking, Lee Jaboom, it's like Sherman, Cam Chancellor. It's like he gets mentioned, but it's like you saw what happened to that team when he got hurt. It's like they became a not great defense, good but not great instantly with the loss of one player.
Yep. This is gonna be a weird one, but I really think the Cardinals may finally put it together. I think they may finally figure it out and get a Super Bowl berth.
You think so?
Well, they have one of the best teams in the league talent-wise across the board. Carson Palmer hasn't been able to stay upright, but they are going to have a top pick this year. They still have David Johnson. They still have Larry Fitzgerald. They could very easily take a high-level running wide receiver in the top few rounds. Their defense is going to be good. They still have Matthew. They still have Peterson. I believe they just signed another corner. They have the pieces to really be a good team, especially getting into a shootout with others. And they have a veteran quarterback. David Johnson obviously performed well in spite of their lack of success last year.
Johnson, I mean, if the MVP is a vacuum that has nothing to do with the record of the team that you're on, Johnson should have been MVP. I mean, he was just if MVP literally means most valuable player to a team, it's hard to go against him. Clearly, the team wasn't really good, but could you imagine what that team would be without him? I mean, oh my God, rushing and receiving and everything. It was just like, the ball goes to Johnson. The ball goes to Johnson. I know because in our fantasy league, I did not have him. And I faced against him all the time, and I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. So we're heading off into that, and I like that. I like that pick for the Cardinals. That's kind of interesting. So we're heading to our final questions for Brian here today. We're looking at fandom right now. Would you rather be the fan of a team that is constantly, like, say, 7-9, 9-7, that middling ground right there, always close to the playoffs, maybe once in a while making it in, kind of like the Lions have been, or a Browns-like team that is always, 2-14, but with a lot of good, draft capital, a lot of positive, we have the number one pick, we can get Myles Garrett kind of thing going on.
I've been in both positions with Carolina because they always did the whole, like, okay, we had a winning season, now we're having a losing season, we're having a winning season, now it's another losing season. It was a roller coaster for them. And then they finally came out and were like, they had 2 really crappy years to be a Panthers fan, and then they came up and drafted Cam, and then they came out and they won 12-4. Then they went 7-9, 7-8-1. Then they went 15-1. Then they went 6-10. It's really exciting to watch the draft when you have a lot of players to see, and it almost gives you a sense of entitlement when they actually do become good. So if I had toughed it out this long as a Browns fan, I would just keep going with it, because eventually they're going to get good. It may not be in the next decade. It could be in the next 5 years. Could be in the next 3 years, depending on how their drafts go. But it gives you a sense of ownership and a real, like, it's almost like you were there in the trenches with them as a fan and
then when they finally
do something, then you can be like, I was there for the bad times. Like, I can say I was there for when Jimmy Clausen was our starting quarterback, or I was there when Vinny Testaverde was starting a game over 40, or I was there when David Carr was our quarterback, or I was there when Brian St. Pierre, who was a former third-string quarterback for the Cardinals, was a quarterback. Like, it's tough, but you remember them. They are ingrained in your memory, so then it makes it all the much better when they're actually doing well.
You mentioned the Browns. Let's go into that. I think the Browns could be decent this year. Yeah, 6-10, 7-9, something like that. It seems like their front office has really turned it around this offseason. They've been making a lot of, like, even like NFL pundits are like, that was a really savvy move they made to get more draft picks, to get all this draft capital.
Yep. They've done a great job of stockpiling draft picks, and in this day and age, you see teams like Green Bay and the Steelers and Seattle, who all have drafted extremely well and haven't really broken the bank on free agents. And what you see is a team where when somebody gets hurt, next man up, they are still chugging along. The draft is a really great way to build a team because you get guys cheap, you get them on guaranteed deals, and if they don't work out, it doesn't hamstring you forever. So the Browns are just stockpiling the picks. They're doing a good job. They're making moves to show that they're serious about getting better, but doing it the right way instead of just signing like that one guy off the street who's supposed to be the savior, or drafting Johnny Manziel as the character concerns. Myles Garrett and Jamie Collins alone are going to make that defense difficult in that division. Like, just those 2 guys. So,
and they do still have Joe Hayden.
They still have Joe Hayden,
pretty good.
Too. Yeah,
he's a pretty good.
He goes toe to toe with AJ Green twice a year and Antonio Brown twice a year. So it's. I gotta say I like what they've been doing. As long as they don't fudge it up and not take Myles Garrett, I think that they'll. God.
So the Browns GM right now today. Do you trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, and roughly what are you giving if you do?
Not a first round pick.
If
I'm Cleveland, I have too many other needs.
Let me play devil's advocate here. Even in a league that had a first and a fourth round pick traded for Sam Bradford, and Mike Glennon's making $15 million a year.
It's just so tough. Like, for Cleveland, their issue is they've been so consistently awful. Like, the Bears were not bad. They were in the playoffs not long ago.
Devil's advocate one more time. What is the one... No one can disagree with it. You're consistently awful. What is the one thing you have to fix first for that to happen?
You could... Quarterback is the best answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is the only answer.
The Texans have done a lot without a quarterback.
Yes, but they're never going to win the Super Bowl without a very good quarterback. I mean, people will always bring up Trent Dilfer, but it is out of 51 Super Bowls, it's like there's really, even Brad Johnson with the Bucs was like, okay. You know what I mean? So there's only one Trent Dilfer that you can go to. Everyone else is at least like very, very good. So I got to play devil's advocate because I don't know if I've got to be honest, I don't know if I want to see it. I don't know if I want to see it. Now, if they gave the number one, give Myles Garrett, please. But they're not going to because they're not the Browns of yore, it seems like. Browns 5 years ago would have been like, take both our firsts. They totally would.
They would have gotten fleeced so easy. Like, it's the only thing I could feasibly see happening that the Patriots might accept would be their 17th pick. The first round 17th pick for Garoppolo. But they'd really have to believe in him.
So you're the Patriots and Tom Brady is 40 years old. Do you do that then?
No. At this
point,
no.
you think that that trade should not happen?
No. I really think that the Patriots should try to hold on to Garoppolo as long as they can because Brady says he wants to play all this time, but how long do you really know that's going to happen? I mean, the drop-off for Peyton Manning was so steep from his year where he once again set the touchdown record to Super Bowl year.
Right, and I totally get that. I guess the only thing you can... what Brady's done in his career is unprecedented. So the only thing I can really say as someone who's seen him play like every single game is that, dude, if he says it, I believe it. You know, it's there's no science, there's no anything. If he's like, I want to play till 45, it's like, I could see it, you know. And again, this is a guy who doesn't eat tomatoes because they don't like break down in your body good enough. Like tomatoes, like if you were like, did you have a tomato today? I'd be like, yeah, I had a that was my vegetable for the day. I had a tomato, and Brady's like, oh, I would not touch a tomato. Get out of here. So I don't know. It was one of the most interesting standpoints of this offseason for that. I got 2 more quick questions for Brian today. The team in the worst position in the NFL right now. To me, the answer is obvious, but I want to hear if you have any counter to this. I think it's the Chargers, the Los Angeles Chargers. Most of the great players are older. Phillip Rivers, Antonio Gates. They moved to a city that literally does not want them. They have, and again, this isn't as huge, but they have probably the worst owner in the NFL, Dean Spanos. Like, he just seems to not care about the team at all, besides literally, again, you're an owner, you want to make money.
Yeah.
Robert Kraft makes a lot of money, and so does the Panthers owner... Jerry Richardson. He makes a lot of money, but, he also spends money and lets his guys do stuff. So, no huge signings that I can think of. There's only a couple really good, younger players. I just think they're in an absolute terrible position in a good division, too.
The problem for the Chargers was just that they needed help with something that some owners don't need help with it. Like, they needed help financing a stadium, and the city of San Diego just was not willing to help them. So I think that I can agree there that the Chargers are probably in the worst position. That said, the Niners are still looking kind of bad as far as like their whole situation. Like, their organization got darn near blew up like 2 years ago. And they're still recovering from that. Like, players retiring left and right, having to fire all the. They paid 3 different head coaches last year.
Who was that guy they had before Chip Kelly?
Jim Tom Sula.
Jim Tom Sula, the guy who looks like he's your uncle, who's just like, hey kid, you want to go smoke a cigarette? He looks like that guy.
He's an offensive line coach, and then they just that organization is just in such shambles because their owner just takes so much control of their personnel moves. So I think the Chargers, just from the standpoint of what they've done this year in the short term, are definitely in the worst position, but I don't think the Niners are that far behind right now.
Isn't that... Well, I actually might want to counter that by saying the 49ers, I feel like, have done some pretty good stuff this year. Kyle Shanahan, despite his boneheaded Super Bowl stuff, seems to have an okay head on his shoulders.
No, yeah.
They've made some decent acquisitions and signings, and obviously they have the number 2 pick overall. I view them a little less bad now that they got rid of Chip Kelly.
It's not just Kelly, though. It's more of an organizational, up at the top. That's the problem for them. That's part of why they pushed Harbaugh away. They're in a good position right now to totally turn it around, obviously, within the next couple of years. I just have seen... I've been friends with a couple different Niners fans. Finch is one of them. But I've been on their sites before, really following along with their hardcore fans, and they really hate that organization sometimes. Like,
Jed York seems like that perfect. He seems like the West Coast Dan Snyder of the Redskins.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why these owners, like, just can't. I mean, I guess I understand it, but it's just such a shame that they can't, like, turn it off like their football fandom and just be like, what is, if someone was like, well, what's the sign of a great owner? I'd be like, finding a great football mind to do football stuff for you.
Yep.
You know, Robert Kraft does that. Is Robert Kraft going to go to Bill Belichick and be like, I think you should sign this guy? You know what I mean? Yeah. I think you should sign this guy. You know, Dan Snyder. Can you believe that, what's his name, Jay Gruden is, like, the longest tenured Redskins coach in, like, a really long time? Jay Gruden, like, gives me no hope for the future. I look him on the sideline, and I'm not like, I have, like I'm Mike Tomlin. Like, I have confidence in that man. It's like, you'll see him on the sideline, and he's the longest one because he's just going to be like, Dan Snyder's like, do this. Okay, yeah. Where's my paycheck? You know, kind of thing. I can't understand how these owners, you know, just do that and just go about, and a great example of Jed York, when he was having that questionnaire, you know, where I was talking about how he had to let all the coaches go and all this stuff, and like someone asked, like, well, what about you? And he's like, well, I mean, I'm the owner, so, you know, I have to stay. I'm the owner. And like everyone was just like, yeah, but what if you weren't? It's just like, yeah. You know, like, just, like, be, like, you can be an owner, but just, like, and, like, really be into your team, you know, but, like, hey, buddy, do you got to make every decision? Do you got to be, like, if Jed York sold the team, like, the 49ers would have a parade.
Yeah.
Like, legitimately. And, like, that's so bad for, like, something you want to love so bad, but the very top guy that you're giving your money to and everything, you're like, man, I hate that dude so much. Yeah. So, very last question. I have to ask this to literally every one of my football friends, and you already know the answer to this because of my past mentality. With it being free agency time, would you rather sign for a team that gives you, let's say, 10 to 20% more money, but you know you would be on a bad team with no chance, or take 10 to 20% less and be on a good team? You know, real life standards. $15 an hour for a job you love, $20 an hour for a job that it's just a job.
And you know, that's going to be a hard question for guys like us, because we're not making near the level of money that NFL athletes are going to make.
Definitely true.
I'm going to go ahead and say that I would probably be, just knowing myself and the more sentimental mentality when it comes to the NFL, I would want to be on that team that's competitive. So I would take that pay cut. But that said, I have no depth or no real understanding of that kind of money. I mean, the real life standards, $15 an hour, $20 an hour. Some people, that's the difference between paying their rent and everything and not, you know?
Right.
So right. I'll say that I would probably say that I would be the guy that would play for a more competitive organization, but I have never faulted any player for going after the money for that.
And, you know, I can look at it that way and just be like, you know, your careers are short. You sign, probably 2 big contracts, and sometimes for these players, like 1. And these are for the star players. These aren't for, like, just your average, you know, Joes. But I don't know. Like, this Dante Hightower just signed, you know, with the Pats, and apparently the Jets were offering him, like, $2 million more a year, you know. And obviously, it's always so silly to talk about this, because it's like, well, I'll never at any point in my life have, like, $2 million to, like, just sitting there. Hey, look at that, you know, kind of thing. But it's like, would you be on an absolute dumpster fire, and the Jets are a dumpster fire, where you're like, you'll be the star player on the team, but they're going to be terrible, you know, or take, you know, 10% less, which is $2 million a year, and go back to the Pats. And I don't know. I think the answer is obvious once you, you know, make enough in the league. You know, if it's huge, if it's like Pats are offering 2 and the Jets are doing 12, well, yeah, you can buy some Super Bowl rings later. You know, you can buy them off eBay. It's cool. You know, buy some Pats Super Bowl rings. But I don't know. I get that answer. Not many people answer it the way you do. Most people are like, I would just take whatever gave me the most. And clearly some players like Deshaun Jackson, you know, he went to, I mean, the Bucs are a good team, but like, he was like, who gives me most? Great, I'm going to you. I don't care. Yeah. I don't care where you are. I can play in Alaska. Give me the most money and I'll go there, kind of thing. So, yep. I think that's about all I have. Thank you once again, Brian, for being on. Any last minute things you would like to Go into our plug. Go Panthers. Panthers.
Go Panthers. Nah, I don't got anything else. If you guys liked talking or hearing us talk, obviously you can go read the Cat Scratch Reader website. I write several times a week on there. Also, I'd love to come on here and talk more about video games and stuff with you, since that's what this is mainly about. So anytime you want to have me on, Spencer, feel free.
Sounds good to me. I think once in a while after this we'll start talking video games again. But yeah, you gotta let it loose once in a while and do the whole NFL thing once in a while. I mean, we're only 6 months away from the season.
I know,
starting.
right?
Can you believe that?
Right around the corner, basically.
I mean, I'm getting ready for the parties already. So anyway, thank you again for being on, and thank you out there in YouTube land for listening.